Between then and the time I graduated from high school, I read my way around the room. If I'm asked now to remember what I read in that storefront library, I can only recall that I went from Grimm's fairy tales to Little Women to Of Time in the River. Then I entered college, where I discovered that all these years I'd been reading literature. It was at that moment, I think, that I began rereading, because from then on, it was to the books that had become my intimates that I would turn and turn again, not only for the transporting pleasure of the story itself, but also to understand what I was living through and what I was to make of it. I'd grown up in a noisy left-wing household where Karl Marx and the international working class were articles of faith. Feeling strongly about social injustice was a given. So from the start, the politicalness of life colored almost all tangible experience, which of course included reading. I read ever and only to feel the power of life with a capital L, as it manifested itself thrillingly through the protagonist's engagement with those external forces beyond his or her control. In this way, I felt, acutely but equally, the work of Dickens, Dreiser, and Hardy, as well as Mike Gold, John Dos Passos, and Agnes Smedley. I had to laugh when a few years ago I came across an essay by Delmore Schwartz in which he, Schwartz, takes Edmund Wilson to task for Wilson's shocking lack of interest in literary form. For Schwartz, form was integral to the meaning of a literary work. For Wilson, what mattered was not how books were written, but what they were talking about and how they affected the culture at large. His habit always was to place a book in its social and political context. This perspective allowed him to pursue a line of thought that let him speak of Proust and Dorothy Parker in the same sentence, or compare Max Eastman favorably with André Gide. For Schwartz, this was pure pain. For me, it was inexpressibly rewarding. And what could have been more natural than that the way I read was the way I would begin to write? One night, toward the end of the 1960s, I attended a speak out at the Vanguard, a famous jazz club in Greenwich Village. The evening was billed as Art and Politics, and on the stage was the playwright Leroy Jones, later Amiri Baraka, the saxophonist Archie Shepp, and the painter Larry Rivers. In the audience, every white middle-class liberal in the city. Very quickly, it became clear that art didn't stand a chance up against politics. Jones dominated the event by announcing early that not only was the civil rights movement tired of what he called white intervention, very soon blood was going to run in the seats of the Theater of Revolution, and guess who was sitting in those seats? The place went up in flames, everyone yelling and screaming some version of "not fair" all at once, with one voice in particular heard above the rest crying out, "I've paid my dues, Leroy, you know I've paid my dues." But Jones, unperturbed and unimpressed by the uproar, continued to explain that we au faits had fucked it all up, but when they, the blacks, got there, they would do it differently. Smash up the world as we knew it and start all over again. I remember thinking, he doesn't want to destroy the world as it is. He wants to take his rightful place in it as it is. Only right now, his head is so full of blood, he doesn't know it. I wanted badly to call that out, as everyone else was calling out whatever hurt most. But he terrified me. One can hardly imagine the strength of Baraka's public presence in those painfully inspired days. So I kept silent, went home, and, burning with a sense of urgency I couldn't really account for, sat up half the night describing the entire event from the perspective of my one great insight, and discovering, as I wrote, what was to become my natural style. Using myself as a participating narrator, it was my instinct to set the story up as if writing a fiction. The other night at the Vanguard. In order to put my readers behind my eyes, have them experience the evening as I had experienced it, feel it viscerally as I had felt it. I've paid my dues, Leroy, you know I've paid my dues. Then come away moved and instructed by the poignancy, not of art and politics, but life in politics. Although I did not then know it, it was personal journalism.